The Academy Speaks, the official podcast of the International Academy of Trial Lawyers. And I'm Joe Tucker, president of the Academy and your host. As tensions have escalated between the United States and Canada over tariffs, political rhetoric, and strained relations, it's important to remember that the rule of law just doesn't stop at our borders. Today's episode is about cross-border solidarity, legal leadership, and how lawyers on both sides of the border can stand together when politics threaten principles. I'm joined by two extraordinary fellows of the Academy, Brian Gover, newly elevated Dean of the Academy, and Paul LeVay, both partners at the highly respected Canadian law firm, the Stockwoods, LLP in Toronto. Their careers span courtroom excellence, legal reform, and international collaboration. And they are exactly the kind of voices we need in this moment and at that time. Brian, first you. Congratulations on being the Dean of the Academy. I've stood there and I know how important it is. You are literally the legal and moral conscience of the Academy. And it's a well-deserved honor for you, Brian, given your decades of experience and leadership. I'd like to start with a broad question to you, Brian, from your perspective. How have recent developments, particularly the U.S. administration's rhetoric and trade policies, affecting Canadians' perceptions of American legal and political institutions?
Well, thank you, Joe. And I would start by saying that for Canada, there's a sense of betrayal on the part of the U.S., which we've always seen as a leader in establishing the international rules-based order after World War II, in giving in a generous way through the Marshall Plan, through its equivalent in Japan, and rebuilding not only economies, but legal systems. And of course, important books have been written about that. And also how, for the betterment of the world, America prospered and America's allies prospered. And the sense of betrayal that we feel stems from the fact that we've always felt this strong kinship with America and Americans. And organizations like the Academy play such an important role in bringing us together. It's literally how I know you, Joe. And you know, the wonderful friendship and collaboration that's been for years. So,
well, Brian, I want to stop you there for a second. I remember when you and I first met. You had told me that, you know, I'm from Philadelphia. You had told me you'd been to Philadelphia and you started talking about West Philadelphia. And I was like, what the hell is a Canadian, let alone someone from Toronto, doing down in my city? And it was about the presidential election. Tell me, why are elections important to you Canadians, apropos of what's going on right now?
well, they're important to us because of the connection we feel to Americans. And Paul LeVay, my great friend and law partner, whom you'll hear from shortly, of course, was part of that crew that went down and knocked on doors. And we did.
Paul, I didn't know you were hanging out in West Philadelphia.
Well, I was in a neighborhood known as Baghdad.
Yes, yes.
And we felt it important, though, because for one thing, it was through the Academy that we heard of people who were going knocking on doors and explaining why Barack Obama deserved a second term, pulling out the vote in a largely African-American community, and to explain what he stood for. And we felt that was a worthwhile way for us to contribute. Now that is a measure, I think, of how close we feel, that we felt we could go to another country working with American lawyers and knocking on doors in that way. And I also think back to 9/11, Joe, because Canadians felt that an attack on America was an attack on Canada, on us writ large. And we, you know, frankly, it was moving to hear rescue workers chanting USA, USA. It brought Canadians to tears. Canadians signed up to fight in Afghanistan, to fight the war on terror. And of course, we did it through the Canadian Armed Forces. 158 Canadians died. And
We
hundreds
genuinely appreciate that too.
and hundreds were maimed. And now for this sense that America would turn its back on international agreements, to where, like NATO, where one signs on to protect all. Even the threat of it is deeply offensive to Canadians, and we appreciate. We've been protected for decades by the USA, and we are in America's debt for that. In America's debt for the leadership in so many ways when it comes to the international order and international law. We understand that, but you can see how this sense of betrayal has set in.
I hear you. I hear you, my brother. Before I turn to Paul, this concern that you're raising, do you see this translating into legal or professional hesitation, such as firms or fellows reconsidering engaging with American institutions?
Well, I think that some Canadians, and we see this just in the data from the airlines, some Canadians are not traveling to the U.S. I think Paul feels strongly about travel restrictions setting in, and for that from the U.S. travel advisories, if you could believe it, from Global Affairs Canada, referring to Canadians traveling to the U.S. This is so foreign to us. So at an institutional level, yes, there's concern. On an individual level, Canadians are always going to feel a strong bond to their American friends, and that will prevail.
Well, speaking of that, my good friend Paul, I made a joke during a board meeting, and Paul got rightfully upset when he got up to speak. I said, and from our 51st state, Canada, speaks Paul. And Paul, I've never seen you upset before, Paul, but you got upset. Tell us how I upset you with my joke that wasn't funny. Tell me about that.
It was a temporary upset with you, my brother from Philadelphia, who I love. But I will tell you why. The rhetoric of the 51st state is particularly disturbing to Canadians because although we're friends, Canada from its inception defined itself in large part as being not American. We can take it, from the United Empire loyalists who fled to Canada during the American Revolution. The first act of the Canadian state was to construct a coast-to-coast railway in order to prevent manifest destiny from the US. There was economic nationalism in the 1970s that revolted against being a branch plant of the United States. So although we're great friends, in large part, we've defined ourselves that way, and our sovereignty is important to us. And it makes us feel profoundly disrespected. And so
we down here, we say that America is dissing you.
Yeah, no, exactly. And look, I echo everything that Brian just said about America being a country historically to emulate and to admire. And also that we have many individual Americans who are friends. But this double whammy of attacking our economic well-being by disrespecting who we are is profoundly shocking to Canadians. And we have a new national motto that comes from the hockey world, and it's elbows up. And there are hats and T-shirts and rallies where the elbows up motto is being put forward. And it's funny and it's not, because while I agree with Brian that our American friendships individually will sustain each other, I do worry about the long-term effects of all of this on the relationship between our two countries, even saying hopefully at some point that this presidency will end and things will return more or less to normal.
Well, I'm coming to hang out. I'm coming to hang out with you guys in Vancouver in July. I have my Canucks jersey. No offense to the Maple Leafs, but I have my Canucks jersey.
We'll forgive you that.
All right. So, Paul, you've long worked at the intersection of professional ethics, civil litigation, and international practice. Hearing what you said, What are you hearing in the Canadian legal community, not just about policy, but about principle and what's been going on with American law firms?
Maybe I'll
Well,
start off, Joe, if I can. And what we see is the contrast between the American system and especially the relationship between the executive branch and the within the executive branch, the Attorney General, and the judicial branch. And in Canada, we have adhered to more of an Anglo-Canadian system where the Attorney General is somewhat at arm's length from the executive. So we have a system where
Well, that's generally how it's been here in America. Even though the president appoints the attorney general, he's
well,
not or she's
exactly.
not the president's lawyer.
Exactly. And we've seen that. Yeah, I know in the 1960s, Robert F. Kennedy was very interested in the role of the Attorney General and distinguishing that role from the rest of the executive branch. We certainly carry that through in Canada. And to the extent that if there's any political interference by the Prime Minister with the Minister of Justice and Attorney General, it's a role that's fused together here. Then by doctrine called the Shawcross Doctrine, the Attorney General noisily resigns and points the finger at a member of his or her own party as the source of the interference with the proper execution of the duties of the Attorney General. And that's so that the Attorney General's important prosecutorial role, for example, isn't weaponized. So the idea of prospective pardons, for example, is foreign to us because we don't get there. So one of the things we see, Joe, is a real pride in our system. And our Chief Justice Wagner, has described Canada as, not an economic superpower, certainly not a military superpower, but as a rule of law superpower.
Well,
And
let me stop you there, Brian, because I want to switch just a bit and piggyback on what you're talking about. Let's talk about our duty as lawyers. The
right,
Academy has always emphasized the rule of law as a shared value, not an American value or Canadian value, but a human one. In light of what we're seeing from the targeting of law firms to judicial attacks, how do we, as trial lawyers, maintain solidarity across borders?
I think we do it on two levels. I think we do it individually. I think we have to wake up every morning knowing
Uh-huh.
that we swore an oath to uphold the rule of law, that we must maintain public confidence in the rule of law. We must protect the judiciary. We're at a time now when, and you've seen it, it's a University of Pennsylvania study conducted annually that shows that respect for the Supreme Court of the U.S. is at an all-time low. And something
Unfortunately.
that's been measured for 25 years, it's never been lower. So we need to think about the social contract, what it is that somehow causes people to believe in the system, for there to be social cohesion. We need to think about that, but organizationally, lawyers have a responsibility to unite and to never be complacent about protecting and promoting the rule of law. And I know that sounds horribly abstract, Joe, but
It sounds corny as a matter of fact. I mean, to tell you the truth, this abstract of protecting the rule of law and people we fancy that term about. And let me switch over to Paul for a second. And Paul, you've led professional organizations and you've taught across jurisdictions. How can we bring younger lawyers into this conversation? Many of you who came to the last meeting said you wanted to come because you were part of the resistance movement. How do we engage younger lawyers, the sense of duty beyond their own docket and their own individual interests? How do we get that moving, Paul?
Well, I think that we, in our individual firms, give our younger lawyers an opportunity to work for the greater good by creating pro bono opportunities for them and offering them a platform to do justice and to promote the rule of law. I'll give you a concrete example. One of our younger partners, an excellent advocate named Carlo DiCarlo, recently took on a case against the Ontario government, which was threatening to close safe injection sites for people suffering from addiction problems in downtown Toronto and elsewhere. And the medical evidence really showed that these sites sort of saved lives and promoted public health, but a populist government was doing its best to shut it down for its own rhetorical reasons. And last week, Carlo won an injunction stopping the government from shutting these sites down. And it's just sort of one example of, he and his colleagues have an opportunity to work for the greater good. They appreciate the importance of the rule of law that the courts are promoting, and will then take it to the next step. I'm confident in the young people that we have in our profession, and that there are future. In terms of what we can all do, I agree with Brian. It sounds abstract, but it's abstract until it isn't. It's not abstract for Perkins and Coy anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And so
And
in
let me
Canada,
throw a plug. Let me throw a plug in. The International Academy of Trial Lawyers. We are the first organization to file a amicus brief. I hit send today on behalf of Perkins Coy, which, and Paul, you were talking about the lawyer at your firm who was representing an interest against the government. And Brian, you've represented clients in Indigenous rights cases, commissions of inquiry, and constitutional matters. What lessons from that work apply to this moment when institutions are under stress, but lawyers are still expected to lead in some instances? Because we've seen major firms bow down and literally kiss the ring, and I could use a different metaphor, to the administration, offering up whatever the administration wants and just capitulating and falling like a house of cards. Help me with this, Brian.
I think it comes down to two things. I think you should never be lacking in courage. You must always be willing to hold the government to account. And that can lead to uncomfortable moments, long hours, and self-questioning. But you need to be willing to hold the government to account, and you need to do it in a way that inspires young lawyers who've learned about the rule of law in law school, wondered if they'll ever get to do something beyond examinations for discovery or depositions, producing reams of documents. No, we have to give them the opportunities. We have to set the example for them. And is there inconvenience involved? Living away from home for months at a time? Yes. But, you have to, I think, hold the government to account, set an example. You'll be doing the right thing by the next generation.
Brian, that word I hope resonates to people. Courage. We need courage. And my sincere thanks to Brian Gover and Paul LeVay, not only for joining us today, but for the principled leadership you've shown throughout your careers. If you believe in what you've heard today, share this episode, subscribe, and join us next week for more conversations with the world's leading trial lawyers as we preserve what matters most: justice, integrity, and the rule of law. This is the rule of law. The Academy speaks. And I'm Joe Tucker. Keep speaking, keep standing, keep agitating. I'll see you next week.